Hey, welcome to your day off. My name is Corey, and today I'm sitting with my dear friend Gabby Bach. And moving forward, I know you guys have heard about this in a few other podcasts, but Gabby and Corey are representing Hairdustry in the Beauty Launchpad podcast. We are joining up this year, and we're going to do a bunch of episodes together. And it's kind of like the way that I like to think about it. And Gabby will let me know if I'm wrong or not, but I like to think of it as kind of like the supplemental podcast to the Beauty Launchpad. Magazine. We're going to talk to a lot of people that they're featuring and try to get a little bit more in-depth detail. Please, if you have any questions or anything for anybody that they're featuring, reach out. We'd love to chat with you. But on that note, let me bring in the queen herself, Miss Gabby Bach. Gabby, welcome to the show, or welcome. It's our show now. Welcome back to our
Yes,
show.
it's our show. We're taking collective ownership of it for sure. Yeah, I'm glad to be back. I'm having fun doing this. It's been a good time.
It's a pretty cool format because this is your first podcast hosting gig, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a little bit of stuff on my own, not to get like too deep into my past, but I have a broadcast journalism degree, so I've always been passionate about more long form content. So in high school, when I was like 15, I had a YouTube channel, and so I've done and kind of had my practice, doing some on air stuff, doing some like longer form content. But this is definitely like the first major professional thing I've done. It's something I've wanted to do for a while, so it just felt like a right time, right place type of thing for sure.
That's so awesome. It's so cool. I love podcasting. I love everything about it. I love that it's not like it doesn't feel like broadcasty, although it's
Yeah,
broadcasting, but it doesn't feel like broadcasty.
it feels more natural for sure. Cause I know like I love putting our magazine content together for sure. But we have page counts and page limits. So a lot of time I'll send all the copy over to our graphic designer and he'll be like, can you cut this down a little bit? And I'm like, oh, sometimes there's some hairstylists that give me such great content and it's hard to be selective and pick and choose about like what words are going to go and making sure that you're really precise. And so it's nice to sort of, like you said, have these supplemental conversations where you can go more in depth and really dive into the things that we're discussing in the magazine and really, I think, in a way, get to know the people who are writing that content as people, because hairstylists are people, of course, besides the things that they do, in the chair or in their professional life, for sure.
You know what I love about a podcast, certainly a podcast that's in the hair industry, is that it's we can s- we you know we can get into these conversations, but it's about we can offer a lot, right? Like
Absolutely.
it's not about us at all, really. It's about the listener and what we can leave with them, and sometimes, I mean, I know I'm a advocate podcast listener, and I listen to everything, that even just sometimes just fun conversation, like, some podcasts are just about conversation. It's not even about like, oh, there's a big win there or anything like that, but that's how I consume them, and I assume that when people listen to us, they're consuming them in that way. But hopefully we can drop a couple nuggets or something that they'll find interesting.
Yeah. How are you listening to this podcast? I want to know how people are listening. Are you listening to it on your drive to work? Are you listening to it while you're
Oh,
like
it's
behind the chair doing someone's cut and color, getting your clients into it? Like I'm curious now how
Yeah.
people
Well, I mean, I
listen.
don't use it that way. I mean, we can talk to our guests today, see how they do podcasts. If they do, we don't even know if they do podcasts. I definitely do it on my commute, or I definitely do it as like, if they're on headphones. I can't do it in open space, but like if I'm working in the yard or I'm working around the house or something, like I can put my headphones on, and it just kind of like takes me out of what I'm doing and brings me into their world while I'm doing something, stupid physical or whatever. I
For
couldn't imagine
sure.
working out that way. I'm sure, Dave today would let us know how he uses it during his workouts. But I think for working out, I kind of need more music or something, for
Nice.
whatever reason. Anyways, Gab, tell us about your guest, and tell us, well, first off, let's open up and say, why are they being featured this in this episode or this edition? I got to get episodes in edition, that verbiage different. Why are they in this edition? And yeah, let's do that.
Cool, cool, cool. So, if you listen to some of our earlier episodes, you'll know that Beauty Launchpad, our January February issue, is out now. And for the new year, taking over as Beauty Launchpad's associate managing editor, I really looked at sort of our editorial calendar that our editor, my editor in chief of the company, passed along to me and was like, how can I make this my own? And one of the first things I thought about was what is it that the hair professional needs, right? And kind of, how can I set myself apart from what the previous editors before me have done, but also how can I really, really address what our hair professionals need? And one of my favorite things about being a part of the like hair community is just all of the hair shows and events and things that I get to go to, because that's really how I connect and meet people firsthand. And when I'm at those shows, I really sort of take a moment to listen and see like what are the hair professionals asking, what questions are coming top of mind, what are their concerns. And the thing that I kept hearing over and over again is needing wellness tips, like work-life balance, like mental health, stuff like that. Like how do you, better take care of yourself. And Corey, I believe you introduced me to our two very lovely guests. I met them at America's Beauty Show. I believe it was my first year there in um, 2023, and it was just so just I loved their energy and loved everything that they were doing, and appreciated them a lot as people. And then now finally being in a position of having authority over Beauty Launchpad and getting to decide what content goes into the magazine, and knowing that I wanted to focus on wellness for our first issue of the year, because I think that's something that's very top of mind for people with New Year's resolutions and everything, is how do you take care of yourself and put yourself first, right? That's what the hair professionals are asking for. And so kicking off the year, that's what I wanted to prioritize. And so the first, again, as I'm putting this issue together and thinking about who do I want to feature, who do I want to include, these are two very lovely individuals that came very much top of mind to me, because they're doing something that they will obviously talk more about, that's really helping hair professionals care for themselves and care for their body, which is super, super important with, being behind the chair and working. So I want to bring in our guests for today, who are the lovely minds behind Industry Aligned, Jenny and David. Thank you both so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having us. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, we're so excited to chat with you.
It's so cool seeing you guys, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit. That I've actually I'm looking for your input, and David and Jenny, I'm looking for you guys' input as well. Is that I'm going to try this year, since we're doing New Year's resolutions, I'm no longer going to use the word balance, because I don't know if I really believe in balance when it comes to like work-life balance. But the word that I was actually having a conversation with, not to name drop, but I was having a conversation with Ambrosia Carey, and we were talking about like how it's not so much about balance. It's not sitting on like some kind of scale, but what it is it's just the harmony between it all, right? It's work-life harmony. So moving forward, I'm going to try to have a harmony thought about what balance is, as opposed to the weight, because balance is literally weight. So can we remove the weight out of that word and create more harmony there? Anyways, Jenny, David, throw it to you guys.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, man. There's a synergy that needs to happen with whatever is involved in your life. And sometimes there's times that we over nurture certain things and we neglect others, and that's just the season for it. But then we need to realize that we need to start to take care of the things that we've been neglecting and start to, again, reharmonize or re-synergize that system. I agree with that 1,000%, man.
That's my new word moving forward. David, and David, give us like your well, first off, let's talk specifically about Industry Aligned, and then I want to kind of talk about like then I want to talk a little bit about your guys' stories, individually, and then ironically, how you guys aligned.
Yeah, absolutely. Why don't you shoot first?
Yeah, so Industry Aligned, we created, really it's been in the works since we first met, and it evolved into what I think something even more helpful than I could have imagined for the beauty industry. Because what started as something that I had learned through my own personal improvements and changes that I made in my life, through a significant amount of weight loss, changing habits that weren't serving me, to getting a very, very serious injury that doctors weren't able to help me out of. Their only form of helping me was surgery, medications, shots. And David was the one that brought me back to life, essentially. I almost lost use of my right arm. I severely herniated my C5, C6. It was a spinal injury, from our career, from being in terrible positions, from not listening to David when he's saying, are you doing your prehab and rehab? Tisk. A lot of maintenance that's required in order to keep this body, this machine, this tool, high functioning, and not just for my career, but for my life. And as I started making these changes before my injury, as I started making these changes in my life and seeing how it was improving my quality of life, I started to notice, the volume around me went up. I started to really hear other people and their complaints. And then I really started to see that I'm not special in terms of me being able to do what I did, and me being able to make those changes wasn't just for me, it's for everybody. Everyone is able to feel good. Nobody has to submit to the way they're feeling. There are things that we can do. So when I would hear people complain about the things that I used to complain about, but now have changed, I realized that there's something that David and I can do together to bring light into this very, very dark area of the industry. And I think there's a lot that we can do. There's a shift in, as I'm sure one of the things that will come up in this conversation with us is, what can we expect in 2025? And for David and I, the tone is going to be a lot different from what we've been providing in the last 4 years. And the tone is, instead of what can we provide, because we've been providing, it's what can you bring to the table? What can you do differently? How can you hold yourself more accountable? What is it that you're doing to hold yourself back from feeling better, from doing better, from being better? And that's really the tone we want to set moving forward. I think we've spent enough time in the fluff and kind of pussyfooting around the truth and trying to deliver it in such a way where people won't push back what we have to offer, and delivering the message with love, the hard truth, but delivering it in such a way where it will be received to the people that are willing to start.
So just a little bit of clarity. So like if I'm a hairstylist, I'm working behind the chair, like why am I reaching out to Industry Align? Like what are you guys offering me, the industry?
Yeah, I think in general, we're offering solutions that are on the spot. So some significant behind the chair solutions, but also some practical solutions for your general life. You're not just a hairstylist. You need to pick your child up at the end of the day. You need to make sure that you can pick up your groceries. You need to make sure that you can manage and maintain your household. So I think we're taking all of these things into consideration. Ever since I've started in this industry, and I've been in it for 25 years, talking about the health and fitness industry and the health and wellness industry, I've always considered the longevity of the individual that's in front of me. I'm not looking to just address your pain. I'm looking to have you transform your life so you never have to look backwards. You can only look forwards, right? And only look forward to what's going to come down the line. So we're talking about on-the-spot solutions on our page, but we're also giving some actual, for the people that are a little bit more into understanding the what's and the whys, a little bit more in-depth context that will allow them to be more invested in what's being offered as well. Now, they can work with me individually. So I do Zoom sessions all over the world with beauty professionals. I've had the privilege of working with so many phenomenal people, and I've met so many amazing people just like you two. And I miss Big Tony too, by the
Big
way.
Tony, I know, Big Tone.
Big Tone. But one of the things that I've noticed among helping so many individuals is I had a lot of people that came to me and we got phenomenal results. People were being told that they were not able to accomplish certain things. You will not ever be able to use your knee the right way, your hip the right way, your shoulder the right way. You're limited. And we've blasted past that. But one of the observations, and I'm kind of like piggybacking off of what Jenny was saying, one of the other observations I've made working with so many people now for the past 4 years, specifically within your industry, is people are falling within two camps, and they're not really going to like what I have to say about this. So this will probably go down in history as your most hated podcast. And we're okay with it. But again, I want you, as Jenny said, I want you to hear our heart in this, because now these are observations that are made after 4 years. So I have some anecdotal data to give back to you. So maybe we can start to shake things up a bit. And people are going to fall within two camps if they're not focused on taking care of themselves. And it's going to either be in the camp of laziness or the camp of complacency and complicitness. And again, people are going to get frustrated hearing this. And when I say laziness, that doesn't mean that you're lazy across the board. Like we were just talking about, sometimes we over nurture certain things and we under nurture certain things. But if we're neglecting our health, we're finding excuses. I don't have time. I'm just not strong enough. I don't know where to begin. It's too difficult. Well, this is why we're here. DM me, have a conversation, reach out. You know, this is what we've been providing for the past 4 years. The other camp is going to be complicit. I'm fine. When really they don't even understand what that means. They're in pain all the time. They've adapted to that pain. These are typically the people in this camp. These are the ones popping Tylenol nonstop. These are the ones self-medicating with liquor. These are the ones maybe smoking cigarettes. And I'm not demonizing any of these things. Sometimes you need to do these things within moderation. But if you're falling within one of these two camps and you're mad at me, be mad at me, but use it as a catalyst to drive you forward. My job is to make sure that people change their lives, even if I never meet you, even if you never come into contact with me. I want you to understand that there's a better way to live. You don't have to live in pain. You don't have to neglect yourself. And it doesn't even take the amount of time that you think that it would to make a significant change in your health, to improve your overall quality day to day, again, behind the chair or outside of the salon or barbershop. I'm off my pedestal.
Gabby.
Yeah, I love that. And I loved, and I seriously recommend to everyone who's listening to this to go and read the lovely feature that you put together in our magazine, because you dive and talk so much about physicality in the issue, which is really, really great. But I think one of the other things that I want to talk about and kind of make sure that we address too is diet as well, because that's something that you guys cover. And I think that's super important, because I know one of the things BLP is really doing this year is also sort of rebranding ourselves a little bit and looking at the past content that we've posted and seeing, you know, how we can change up our tone a little bit and just be more clear about what it is that we're offering hair professionals. And a lot of people love our relatable content, and some of our memes, and those tend to perform very well because that's the nature of the social environment. And a lot of the content, you know, like sometimes a lot of it came before me because I've only been with BLP for about 2.5 years, is a lot of memes about like, as a hair professional, I'm running on like 3 iced coffees and not taking a lunch break. And that plays into, you know, how you physically feel as well. So those things go very hand in hand. But I think we don't talk about the diet side of things as well, because I feel like you see it manifest more as physical pain, like, you know, the wrist pain, whatever it is that may be. But diet is super important too. And I know that's something you've covered on your page. And sort of curious what for hair professionals, you know, who are like struggling to fit in a lunch break, or like, what are some of your like go-to salon snacks or things that you you know, recommend incorporating into your diet if you're a hair professional to help, you know, better take care of your wellness?
I would say, just from my experience alone and everything I've learned from David, is, you know, when I first started working with him, that was one of the first things he addressed. And I wasn't the type that would undereat. That was never my issue. But it was what I was eating, and the combination of my foods and things like that, and the timing of my foods. So what he helped me prioritize was protein, and understanding the benefits of a higher protein, especially as a woman. And the more I started learning this stuff, and this is really why my heart went towards wanting to help this industry specifically, instead of making this such a general thing, because people will come and say, oh my gosh, this would be great for dentists. This would be great for nurses. This would be great for, and I'm like, the beauty industry is like 99% women. And I know how much I have benefited from the information that David has given me and taught me. And I know how much everyone else in the industry would benefit too. So protein-focused meals and snacks. Now, one of the things that I'm really going to be able to speak from a place of experience, because of the the change in direction I'm going to with my career is how to juggle and how to actually fit in meals where people might say, I don't have time to eat. So the last 5 years, I've been working in a very small salon. It's only 3 chairs. I've been renting my chair. I'm in control of my schedule. So somebody might be able to say, well, Jenny, you can do whatever you want. You work for yourself. You work in a very peaceful environment. You've got all the time in the world to make your meals. Well, now I'm still working in Chicago, but we moved to Arizona. I'm traveling back and forth as a hairstylist. As of tomorrow, by the way, for anyone listening, we're recording this in December. So tomorrow, December 10th, I will be starting at a new salon. I'm going to start assisting. I'm going to be helping somebody who's an incredibly talented, busy hairdresser. And I'm going to know exactly what it's like and those spots I need to fill in. And I'm going to be able to speak from experience of where I'm fitting in those snack-sized, high-protein meals so that somebody can come to me and say, Jenny, how are you doing this? How are you doing this? Because what I'm finding is there is always time. If we've got time to double click and double tap on somebody's post and check through somebody's stories on a 2-minute break while someone's processing or a client's running late, and we need to plan for smaller meals so we can fit those in any space we can, right? Like, I don't go hungry at work. Now that I'm traveling back and forth in Chicago, while I'm there, I need to maximize my time. That means I went from not double booking to double, triple booking now. I still eat. So I would say my go-to meals, which I'm actually preparing a little something for everybody coming up. It'll be released in early January. But I'll give you a few right now. If you are not dairy intolerant, we always say cottage cheese, yogurt, making those snacks readily available for you. I think those have been really, really great for me because you can make them sweet or savory. Everyone's a little different. You can throw protein powder and things like that and up your protein even more if you digest well. And digestion is something that David helped me think about more and more too. As long as it feels good in the body, the better it feels in the body, the better it digests, the better my energy will be behind the chair. So being very mindful of that too when I'm thinking about these snacks. Making my meals a little bit smaller and having them every 2 to 3 hours has been better for me and my digestion, my energy, because I'm not cramming this enormous meal in once a day and having it just kind of sit like a brick in my belly. And then also going for hours without eating and hitting that like running on fumes feeling. So as far as meals go, making them more small and protein packed instead of like a higher carb, which won't fill me up as long. I'm going to have David actually go into that a little bit more because that's as far as I can speak on it. As far as energy levels, there's a lot that goes into food and how it actually fuels us and the common misconceptions behind what we think will give us energy or what we think will deplete us or what we think will make us, air quotes, fat. There's so much more to food that I think David can touch up on. This would be his area of expertise.
Yeah, you guys want to keep going on the food a little bit, or you
Yeah,
want to
I
switch
mean,
to something?
I do. I just, how do we source through? Like, it seems like every 2 months there's a new diet thing, whether, and I don't mean diet as far as, losing weight or whatever, but just there's always stuff about there about what we should consume, what we couldn't consume. And 90% of the well, that's probably a lie. 50% of the time it conflicts with what we learned about 50% of the time before. Like, I was watching, I don't know who it was, but it was this woman, I think she's Dutch or something, but she's talking about like a glycemic diet and like, how have you seen these memes, by the way, or these videos that I'm
Absolutely.
talking about? And
Absolutely.
and all these people, they always talk from a place of expertise, and they always talk from a place of like, oh well, yeah, that makes sense. You know what I mean? But it's so hard to source through. I mean, just last year, everybody was talking about intermittent fasting, and now we're talking about the glycemic diet, and like it's all just how do we source through it, or how much of it is marketing, how much of it is real, what makes sense, what can we be doing? I'm interested in kind of bringing the conversation there.
Brother, I love this conversation. Actually, I have it daily because of my job. I think
You
it's a
have
great
to.
question. It's a great question. There's so much to navigate now. We're inundated with ideas and images and scare tactics. And I think here's the first thing to think about when we're thinking about someone credible. They don't speak in qualifiers. They don't speak in absolutes. This is the worst. This is the best. Context is key. So we need to start to calm down and stop listening to hyperbolic conversations and hyperbolic statements, right? Grandiose statements of this is the best or this is the worst or this is the end all and beat all. I think that's number one. You can typically tell a charlatan with that. Nutrition is extremely difficult to navigate, and people are really emotional about food. And we've broken ourselves up into different camps. We're intermittent fasters, we're carnivore, we're keto, we're vegetarian, we're vegan, and such and such. I think eating practically for you, number one, is the main focus. And again, getting aware from the scare tactics, going back to that again. Talking about that, I'm familiar with the individual talking about, I want to say her name is the glucose goddess or something like that. The majority of human beings don't have a problem with glucose regulation, right? Insulin regulation. Notice I said the majority of human beings. There are outliers out there, and we are getting sicker as a population. That's something to be aware of. But most people partition their glucose, their carbohydrates, very well. The problem is the abundance of them. Right. So we want to make sure that we're not going too far, too much with anything. So if you think in terms of moderation, regardless of your eating style, I think that's a great place to start. Let's use some common sense. Intuitively, how does it feel? Going back to what Jenny said, how does it digest? Do I feel bloated after a meal? If something bloats you, there's probably a problem with some general gut dysbiosis there, where we're feeding negative bacteria and getting a negative result. That doesn't mean every time, but that means the majority of the time. So it's something to kind of think about. Man, I feel bloated every single time I eat bananas. Let's remove the bananas and see how you feel. Maybe brain fog, starts to clear up as well. Maybe your digestion improves and eliminating waste in the bathroom. I mean, we can go on and on about these type of things. But I think if you're starting to overanalyze things you don't understand, like food chemicals would be another one. Oh my God, there's red dye number 40 in this. And that's kind of like a bigger topic of conversation too, where we're looking to ban specific chemicals in America. And I'm not saying we shouldn't improve our food quality, but the same stuff that's being banned here is under a different name in Canada that they ban, or we ban, or we go back and forth between different countries. And if you're not familiar with food science, don't get yourself wrapped up in scaring yourself and creating a negative relationship with food. And one of the things that actually yanks on my heartstrings, because like you said, was it 90 something percent of the industry?
It's a big percent. I threw 99% out, but
Probably big.
yeah,
It's a pretty high percentage of women,
over 90%, I'm sure, women.
which makes sense.
I mean, I think as a general rule, we can just say 80-20 because that seems to work for every kind of statistical kind of thing.
That's super fair, bro. That's right down the pipe. So I've worked with a majority of females throughout the entirety of my career, 25 years, and I've only seen women stay in a perpetual cycle of undernourishing themselves. And it crushes me because they do not get the result that they're after. So if we break up again in two categories, and I'm just using all of these two category scenarios to simplify it for everyone. We have people that are undernourished, they're hypocaloric, they don't eat enough. And then we have people that are hypercaloric, they're overnourished, they eat way too much. So you also have to kind of pay attention. Are you in this camp and are you getting the result that you want? If undernourishing you is making you feel fantastic, if you feel awesome, which I generally don't see, I see getting the opposite result. I see even more fat accumulation because of this restriction, because women's hormones are pretty tricky. They're very, very tricky to navigate, and we need to be mindful of that when we're adjusting nutrition and we're walking a path. So I see a negative connotation that way. I see a negative connotation this way. And again, if you see a positive result, I guess you can keep doing what you're doing, but know that things are only good until they're not. right? So we need to think sustainability again. My mind always goes to longevity. How are you going to feel not in 5 days from now in that crash diet, in 10 days or 14 days? How are you going to feel in 6 months? Are you going to be able to produce the same quality behind the chair? Are you going to have the same mental focus and clarity to establish that connection and relationship with your clientele base? Are you starting to fade out? Are you starting to get more short-tempered? Are you starting to feel more uncomfortable? Again, is your digestion affected? We need to start to pay attention to these things internally, and not verifying every feeling per se, but start to get away from the people that are extremely myopic in the health sphere that are looking to market something to you directly. Like I was saying earlier, I'm not the end all beat all either. But if I'm saying something that sparks a conversation, that sparks you actually doing something, because intention is an effort. If it sparks effort in you, and I never meet you, our mission is accomplished. This is what we came to provide for your industry, is to make sure that you guys have some awareness. We bring some general concepts. And I'll close on this note on this topic. I have brought nutrition to our page before, and it's been well received on our page by our audience, but it was shared on bigger platforms, and man, did it get some negativity. Who is this man telling me what to eat? How dare you tell me what to put in my mouth? I'll never tell you what to put in your mouth, as I'm saying now. I'm suggesting alternatives to have you think critically. My job is to make you think about you more, not follow me blindly, not follow the glucose goddess, not follow another fitness influencer. Start to have a discernible filter for information so you get a pea-sized dosage. Not this, I'm getting showered with so much information. It creates a paralysis by analysis. And I sit on my hands and I do nothing. And I watch myself decline year for year. Make sense?
Yeah, that's so powerful for sure. And I've noticed, the concern and the want for hair professionals for looking at food and different options. Like we put out a piece about like food, like best foods for hair growth. And I just saw like how much love that got. And it just made me really interested in like this being a topic that's not talked about a lot for hair professionals, and sort of the want and desire for it, and figure out the best way to go about it. Because like Corey mentioned, there are so many different diets and things everywhere that it's, can be overwhelming. But I think one of the biggest things that I feel like you nailed on that I want to touch on a little bit more is kind of the idea of consistency, or everything in moderation. And one of the things we know about hair professionals is that they're people who travel a lot, right? Like they're at trade shows, they're teaching classes. And I know someone myself who travels a lot. It's really hard to be consistent when you're out and about and you're moving and you don't have access to your own kitchen and to your own like space is your own typical routine. Like when you travel, it tends to throw those things off a little bit. So what is your sort of advice or tips for maintaining consistency in, it could be diet, or it could be, physical wellness as well, as you're out and about as a traveling hair professional?
So now I can say, speaking from experience, which it feels good to be able to speak from this place, is that I have found that there are a lot less excuses than what we've built up and made, right? When I'm traveling now, even when David and I were traveling and going to these shows, we kind of didn't skip a beat. The first thing we would do before we even got to where we were going, we would look on a map and see where the stores were, where the grocery stores were. And if it was like, we don't have time for that, we're going to see what restaurants are around and where the best option is for us. When we were at the beauty show, across the street was a steakhouse. When we were in Chicago, we ordered their grilled chicken. We ordered some of their sides. We stayed on track. Is this always going to happen? Can you loosen up a little bit and enjoy yourself? You absolutely can. But it also doesn't mean that because you're traveling, you have to fall off track. Like now that I'm going back and forth to Chicago, they've got packaged tuna and packaged chicken breast. They've got little packages of mayo that I can make my own chicken salads and tuna salads. They've got pre-hard boiled eggs. They've got pre-cooked chicken at the hot bar. I can go to the hot bar and get food that's already made, but it's still a better option. It's their roasted vegetables. It's their rotisserie chicken. Do you know what I'm saying? there are ways around nutrition so that you don't have to backslide so much and put it on, oh, it's because I travel.
Yeah, I think that preparation is going to be key. Like she said, looking at what's around you, what's available. Is there a gym? Do I like working out? Is that part of what's going on in my lifestyle currently? That's something to pay attention to. Pardon me. Most hotels have gyms in them anyways. You don't really even need a gym to move. You got a floor. If you got a floor, you can do something on the floor. You can squat, you can do push-ups, you can improvise, you can pick up things that are heavy, you can pick up your suitcase. I know that may seem extreme or ridiculous to some people, but keeping your body in motion is what lubricates your joints. Keeping your body in motion is what keeps blood flow to your brain. It keeps your body sharp. And these don't have to be aggressive hour sessions. All of the clinical literature actually shows now that 2 sessions of 25 minutes of intense activity will produce an enormous result in people. So far forward moving, so mind-blowing that they wouldn't even realize who they were after 6 months of moving twice a week, 25 minutes intensely, being deliberate. And it doesn't mean that you don't need to address little micro movements to address your pain. I'm talking about something separate. But even that you can low dose. Going back to the topic at hand, just staying aware of where you're going to be at and prepping ahead of time. There's plenty of meal options. When you have a restaurant in the actual hotel that you're staying at, modify it to fit the foods that digest well for you. It doesn't have to be like, well, I'm going to eat that even though they brought it to me and I know that it's not good for me. I'm even a little bit allergic to it or I feel funny after it. People don't want to be unaccommodating. People don't want to ask for something. Sometimes they don't want to seem like, I don't want to be a bother. Be a bother. This is your health. And you'll notice that the server in front of you is actually pleased to accommodate you. They're like, oh, we can absolutely do that. We went out to breakfast the other day. And again, we don't sit there and eat chicken breast all day. I was out there eating a huge stack of sugary pancakes. What was it? Raspberry something, chocolate pancakes. Chef's kiss. Delicious. The only thing that I modified though, I said, hey, because I also had a hamburger with that. Don't eat like me, guys, right? Eat like you. But I said, I don't want the bun because I'm going to have all of these pancakes. I'm going to just make an adjustment. I want the pancakes instead of the hamburger bun. Can you bring out that? Can you throw a couple of eggs on it? I mean, I made a weird request. She goes, that's the least weird thing I've heard today. She was happy to do it. So don't think that you're inconveniencing people by addressing your health. And don't think that it takes a lot to pay attention to where you're going and what's around you. We live in a very convenient society that accommodates almost everybody.
Mm-hmm. I also think too, is that paying attention to what your schedule looks like before you get to where you're going. So I've been looking at my schedule coming up because I'm leaving next Tuesday for Chicago. And I'm working an 8-day stretch. And while I'm there, I'd said previously, I like to maximize my time. So while I'm there, every day that I'm there, I'm working. I've already planned out my schedule. I've planned out my meals accordingly to how long I'm going to be there in the day, because every day looks a little different. There are 2 days in that 8-day stretch that I'm going to meet with somebody in the evening. We've already established where we're going to go. So I know what I'm going to get from there. I've already looked at the menu. I've already planned ahead, so I know what I'm going to eat beforehand. When I land, I know what I'm going to pick up from the store that maybe doesn't need a refrigerator, or there's things like that. And even if you're in a hotel, when David and I even travel on vacation, we prefer Airbnbs, and right now you can get them at a reasonable rate. Sometimes it's even better than staying at a hotel, right? You can have a full fridge, you can have a refrigerator, you can have your own kitchen, you can have all of these things. And most of the time you're paying less than what you would pay at a hotel. Mm-hmm. There are so many excuses we make to keep us from pushing forward in a more positive, healthier way. And I think when we look at it as an excuse rather than a reason, we'll feel more convicted to make a change. But until we do that, I don't think any changes will be made. And the reason I'm saying this is because this is how I used to be. Well, I can't do this because of that. Well, I can't do that because of this. Well, I can't. And now I'm able to put my money where my mouth is, because before I was living this cushy lifestyle, living 4 minutes away from work. We lived 2 minutes away from the gym. Our grocery store was 1.5 miles away from our house. This is back in Chicago. Of course, I was able to do these things. I didn't double book. I worked 3 days a week, 8 hours a day. I built up after 20 years to make my schedule this cushy, right? I'm putting my money where my mouth is. And I'm telling you, if you're listening, there aren't that many actual reasons for you not to be able to prep.
It goes back to those two camps, right? You're either lazy, complicit, and complacent. And again, that may be hard stuff for people to hear, but this is the reality of life. I'm not even in the health and fitness industry. I'm in the excuses business. And believe me, I've heard them all. You'd be surprised the things that I've heard, and it doesn't surprise me anymore. Just depends on what you want in life. You'll prioritize anything.
And we say this in such a way that it's not about beating yourself up on it, but I've been very very aware of where I can make changes, and it's an awareness that needs to take place at the end of the day.
David, after all the consulting that you've done with different hairstylists, is there like are there some universal like I don't know what the words problems or pain points, literal pain points? Are there some obvious literal pain points that hairstylists are uniquely suffering from?
Absolutely. There's some commonalities and there's individual discrepancies within those commonalities for sure. And I'd say a big one that I deal with a lot of foot issues. So a lot of plantar fasciitis. I mean, enormous. A lot of general shoulder issues, a lot of frozen shoulder, which is kind of a generalized term. And I don't want to bog you down with any of the science of that and how I address that, but and then there's some kind of those general things like life things that end up kind of just bleeding over into a hairstylist's issues.
Exactly.
Yeah, we can get into that as well. But like, general back pain, low back pain, cervical issues. I mean, there are some repetitive stress areas because there's some specific positions, which is also why we like to address those by just generally starting to move more. If you're standing in one place, you're causing the same level of compression. And you have pattern recognition as a human being. Well, let's say you're holding your shears in the same spot over and over, over and over, over and over. Well, I mean, we can hold that same spot and we can start to rotate a little bit and we can elevate up and down. You're not stuck in these specific positions. I always tell people you have 360 degrees available to you. What else can you do to alleviate some of that pain just by shifting? But absolutely, there's so many commonalities. And right now, like I would say that the foot and the plantar fasciitis issues are pretty significant.
That's
and that
so
goes
surprising to me, David. I got to tell you that's not, like, and obviously like that's not where my pain is. My pain is like, neck, shoulders, and like I have the greatest notch you'll ever feel under my shoulder blade, which is like so gross. But like are there certain I mean, let's take the plantar fasciitis thing. Are there any what can we do, either before we get to work or at work to kind of relieve some of these things, like real, like in the moment type stuff?
Absolutely. So again, I'll talk in some generals because I'm not dealing with someone specific in front of me. We have plenty of movements on the page, and we always get people that DM us, hey, do you have any tips and tricks? We've also been kind of indoctrinated in this concept of being able to biohack health. I'm going to tell you from experience, you cannot biohack health. That would be the equivalent of me saying, hey, I've never cut hair before. Can you teach me some tips and tricks to cut and color? Well, no, you've actually established through discipline for a long time, actual techniques, and the tips and tricks help enhance your techniques after you've established that baseline and even flourished, right? So I think we're kind of putting the cart before the horse in terms of health. So I kind of want people to come back to home base and understand, let's build a foundation and then build it up. So in terms of the foot, the reason that I'm seeing so many problems and the things that they can do to adjust is one, Specific footwear that's being chosen is outdoor footwear for marathon runners. So like Hoka's, and again, people raked me over the coals for this one too. You can shoot the messenger all day long. I'm not offended. If it causes a change in you, let's do something. Let's get you out of pain. But start to look at your footwear. Are you wearing over cushioned shoes all day long on top of a mat? Like, so now we're creating an unstable surface on top of an unstable surface. And what is that causing? Weakened tissues. So your foot is getting weaker. There's less muscle in your foot. It's starting to atrophy because it's actually not using any force pressure against the ground for strong, for strong, stable tissues. So I would say analyze your footwear would be the number one. Start to move your ankle around more and see if it's stemming from the ankle. And what I mean by that, I'll give you one movement, would be ankle cars, controlled articular rotation. So imagine this is my foot, and this is my ankle, and this is my shin bone. I'm going to rest it on something, and I'm going to go in an extremely slow motion, kind of like I'm painting an enormous circle. Got a paintbrush on the end of my toes, and I'm going to go around. Start to move the joint around. Maybe there's some general stiffness there. And if we're starting to deal with some more aggressive tissue issues underneath the foot, again, we're looking at footwear. We're looking at how you're standing. We're even looking back to Gabby's point, talking about food and nutrition. Or even getting back to, is your body habitus in a place to be able to support these tiny bones and joints? Meaning, are you in an overfed state and your body's collapsing? And I'm not trying to harp on people that are in a season of being overweight. What I am saying is that's a contributor. If your body doesn't understand how to balance on its very small leverages, you may need to make some adjustments. If you don't have sufficient lean tissue, which is the opposite side of the spectrum. And I'm not talking about bodybuilder, copious amounts of muscle. Everyone thinks that when you go into the gym, I'm going to get big and buff. You actually don't. It takes an extremely long time. People work their entire life to put on even an insignificant amount of tissue. I'm saying you need sufficient tissue for yourself. And if you can't support yourself and you're pronating, your ankles are dipping in, it's because you don't have the structure and the integrity to level your foot out. And that can be causing foot issues. I hope that answered that question in a roundabout way, but also gave some specifics.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think it's important that if I guess the takeaway from the conversation is if you're having, is I guess you answered it with saying we're not biohacking, but I guess it's kind of like the biohacker or the stretching. But I mean, my follow-up question was going to be, is it more strength or is it more flexibility? But I think you answered that with saying that it's probably more strength there. Gab, what do you have?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to cycle back to sort of the previous thing you were talking about, because one of the things that really stood out to me when I was reading some of the responses that you sent over to me, and you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think I just want to really like hit the nail over the head because I think it's something that doesn't seem very intuitive, which is that you mentioned that that being a hair professional, I think a lot of times we talk about it as being a very physically active job because you're on your feet, you're moving a lot. And I'm pulling this quote directly because I'm staring right at it. You say, though it seems like it's a physically active job, it's actually quite sedentary. And I think that's something that would shock a lot of people because I think hairstylists are constantly moving. They're in different positions, like they're doing a lot of things and that they are very active in comparison to myself, who I think as an editor, I'm sitting and I'm typing and doing a lot. So I think hair professionals would be a lot more active than, like, for example, I would be. And I think that's something that shocked me and may shock a lot of hair professionals as well. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, your like realization coming to that point and sort of things you do to be then more active?
I'll let Jenny field the majority of this one. I just want to touch on the fact that I think people are unaware, the majority of population is unaware that you can stand and be sedentary. And micro movements doesn't mean that there's really any significant motion in your body. If people are familiar with their lymphatic system and they think about lymphatic draining and gua sha stuff for their face, we don't have a pump in our lymphatic system. We're the pump. We need to move a lot in order to get some of this, quote unquote inflammation. And we could talk forever. We could have a whole other podcast on what people think inflammation is, and I won't bore your listeners with that. But we need to move more in general. And like I was saying earlier, with kind of getting stuck in the same position with your shears, you're getting stuck in the same position with your legs, and you're not moving around as much as you think that you are just because you're standing or just even because you're tired.
The one thing I'll say, which Gabby, you probably feel this way because you're sitting. maybe the second you get up, if you need to go use the restroom, or you're like, oh, let me go refill my water, grab another coffee, let me go eat a meal. Just in that getting up, moving, coming back, doesn't it kind of wake you up a little bit?
Yeah, a little
We've
bit.
got
Yeah.
this lethargic feeling when we're behind the chair and we're like, oh my God, I don't know if I can push a little bit more. It's because what looks like standing and active, it's no different than sitting. We haven't moved from that position. We're standing in that same position. The second we move around a little bit, we wake up. It keeps us a little bit more alert, a little bit more engaged, a little bit more ready and prepared. And what I like to do while I'm working, and it's a conscious move. I make myself aware of it, because naturally we fall into this autopilot mode of working because we know our craft. We know how to do it. We focus more on the conversation because we can run through this head of hair, or if we're talking to a nail tech, they're just going through and they're doing their thing. It's on autopilot. So we stop thinking about the body, get back into the body. David says this a lot: get out of your head, get into your body. And think about if you feel a little, ooh, the other day I was working and I felt this little nag under my shoulder blade. And it's a very common pain point for me, not as common because I do more for it now than I used to. But I'm like, oh, I feel a little pain. Let me shift a little and see if I still feel it. Let me stand this way and see if it alleviates. And that's when I noticed my head position. My head position while I was blow dried, my right ear was tilted towards my right shoulder and my right elbow was up in the air. Let me drop my elbow down a little bit. Let me just move my other ear to my other shoulder and see if that kind of takes the pressure off of that shoulder blade. And it did. But if I had stayed in autopilot mode, I would have stayed in that position. And then people are wondering why there's this repetitive stress injury. It's because we're repeating the same motion, even though our body is sending us this warning signal. The more we stay in motion, the better it is for our body and the less chance for a repetitive stress injury.
I want to, if I could really quickly touch on something that you had said, Corey, where it was, you got kind of what I was talking about with the foot, saying that it needs more strength and stretch. And I get an enormous amount of individuals. I just had a few come to me last week that were saying, I've been told I need this area stretched. I've been stretched by everyone. I've been to DPTs and PTs and surgeons, and I'm just so tight. And when I tell them, you're actually not tight, you've been actually over lengthened over time, and we need to strengthen and shorten these areas, their mind is blown. You need the opposite. There's no way. I've been told by dozens of professionals. Yeah, well, it hasn't worked thus far. And going back to what Jenny was saying, as far as, her getting away from her pain, we lack this general awareness. We ignore ourselves. We're distracted by society. And it's becoming exhausting to us. It's draining to us. One, we need to start to be more intuitive and recognize what's going on with our body. But two, if you don't understand what signs and signals mean, and you keep reinforcing bad habits that aren't giving you the result that you want, then you need to reach out to an individual that understands. And if all of those other individuals, like I said, 10 other DPTs and PTs have told you the exact same thing and it's not working, then they're wrong. They're wrong. So we indicate when we have a sense of pain, wow, that muscle must be tight because I have pain there. Well, pain can be many different things, but pain for sure is one thing. It's dysfunction. It's not tightness. It's not a direct indication. Said more often than not, there are all those outliers where you actually are lengthened, but we're talking about women here who don't actually lift a lot of weight to create residual tightness in their muscle. They actually do yoga. They actually do Pilates. They actually do stretch their body out, and they're in more pain than ever. So we need to start to think about things again in the reverse order, start to strengthen before we lengthen. And I think we'll see an enormous alleviation of pain and more of a recognition of body awareness and what you actually need, not over nurturing or under nurturing, but finding a relative synergy like we first discussed in this podcast.
There were a lot of parallels that I found between working on the body and how I see hair as a hairdresser. What we think is intuitive is sometimes the wrong thing to do. You know, like I look at a haircut, and when I first started doing hair, it was like, oh, you do one thing on one side, you do the same thing on the other. But what if the other side doesn't need that? I don't have as much hair on the right side of my head as I do on the left. So I'm not going to texturize the same way on the right as I do on the left. And the same happens with the body, is what I'm learning over time. And really listening to David is, and Gabby, you made a great point by reading over one of our responses to your questions. It's not as intuitive as we think it is, right? And sometimes, and the same thing goes with eating. We eat intuitively. Maybe we shouldn't eat intuitively, because intuitive eating made me 200 pounds. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
intuitive moving made me hurt more. I kept stretching my neck when my neck needed more strengthening. I didn't know my cervical spine was herniated. But because I felt a pain there, I kept stretching it, making it worse. This entire time, David was giving me strengthening movements, but I was intuitively stretching it because that's what made more sense to me.
Yeah. I feel like 2025 and just even just the years ahead feels like a lot of, at least I hope, hair professionals will be, or just in general, people will be looking at sort of making that change, being very active about it, and really just, again, like not, the things that we think are intuitive really aren't intuitive, and just changing the way that we look at our health and our wellness. And I appreciate all the things that you are doing. And so to sort of wrap us up, do you want to talk about some of your plans for 2025 and then how people can find you and get involved?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we've got a program that we just put out that we're going to be pushing in 2025. We can talk about that, our movement program. So we've got a lot of, reasons why a beauty professional doesn't move, right? And we're making less and less reasons for that to happen, giving them more reasons to move, giving them more access to information to move. And what I like to call it is kind of like putting David in your back pocket. So we created this movement program that is now a downloadable program, easy to see on a video, easy to read on a description. The only thing we didn't do was an audio, but it's fine. It's a full body movement program that you can access, whether you're working behind the chair and you have an extra couple of minutes and you feel a kink and you don't know what to do, reference that body part. If you're at the plane and you're at the airport, you're a traveling hairstylist, you can reference that body part and get a little bit of movement before you sit on a plane for hours. There's different times in the day where you can access these movements and incorporate it into your lifestyle, so that that's no longer a reason of why you're feeling these aches and pains. We also, like David had mentioned earlier, he's got his services that he offers to beauty professionals, whether it's one-on-one from wherever you are. You do not need a gym. You do not need all this equipment to get out of pain. You can work with him one-on-one individually via Zoom, as well as his online. Some people like to work out on their own at the gym, but he supplies their personal prescribed programming and nutrition for them specifically. There's that as well. And I think we're most excited about 2025 to show up even more authentically and share our message still in a loving way, just removing the fluff. And I think, for us, we kind of fell into the groove where the more song and dancey it was, the better it would be received. But we have a very serious message. And we really, really want to help the beauty industry. It's an industry that I love. It's an industry that I was able to do so well in, and then I'm able to continuously do it in many different ways. And it's worth saving. It's worth saving. And I'm very, very passionate about it. And I know David's passion is just helping people. He's got so much information and so much experience and so much to give. And that's all we want to do in 2025, is give more in a more authentic way.
That's awesome. Where can they find you guys? Give us the .com or the whatevers.
Industryalign.com is our website. You can find us on there. You can get a full description of our website. You can reach us through email on there. We are on Instagram and Facebook as Industry Aligned, at Industry Aligned. And we are always available. We didn't hire someone to run our page. It's us. So if it takes a few hours for us to respond, it's because it's us and not a robot. We are here for you. We are here whenever and however you need us. And show up if you're ready for us, because we're ready for you.
That's awesome. Thank you guys so much. Gab, thanks for thanks for suggesting they come on and be featured in the BLP, in the first edition of BLP. And Jenny, David, thank you guys so much. Thanks for hanging out. And
Thank you.
although you suck because you're in Arizona, I'm never going to see you at hair shows again. But we'll stay in touch. Maybe.
Can I just share one more thing?
Sure.
Just
Really
to
quick, I got to drop dead.
Okay, just to make it more relatable. There have been days where I've worked 14 hours and I fell off the horse. But the horse doesn't leave. You just get back on the next day. So don't beat yourself up. We don't get anywhere by beating ourselves up. You recognize that you slipped, you recognize that you overworked yourself, and you course correct. Continue to course correct. That's what I want to leave you with.
That's awesome.
I love that.
That's great
Yes.
advice. That should be the title of it. Course correction. Course correct. That's awesome. David, Jenny, Gabby, thank you guys for hanging out, and thank you for joining us on the Hairdustry Beauty Launchpad podcast.
Thank you.
Later, guys.